Hi, this is John with Good Burger Reviews, and I'm here to do a brand new movie review. And that movie is called The Ritual.
Brethren, put on the armor of God, that you might withstand the devil.
This is a very troubled woman, hissing at the side of a church.
The woman's parish wishes to attempt a solemn sacrament.
You mean an exorcism? You would like me to perform it?
No, some poor other soul already has that distinction.
This movie was released in June of 2025. It is starring Al Pacino, Dan Stevens, Ashley Greene, Abigail Cohen, Patrick Fabian, and Patricia Heaton. The basic plotline is two priests, one in crisis with his faith and the other confronting a turbulent past, must overcome their differences to perform a risky exorcism. And this is based on a true story that took place in the Midwest, 1928. It was the most documented exorcism of all time, according to the movie. So this movie is a blend of two movies, well-known movies in these genres, and The Ritual is The Exorcist meets Conclave. So this was a movie that I've been anticipating, I would say highly anticipating. As I anticipated last year, The Exorcism starring Russell Crowe, I was concerned because I thought, will I get disappointed as I did with that movie, or will it come through for me in a different way? And I'm pleased to say this movie does come through. So let's break this one down. I'll say what a star-studded cast this is. And that was another reason why I had much anticipation on this one when I saw the lineup of people who were going to be in this. First thing that struck me right out the gate was Al Pacino. Is he going to be the next guy to step into the starring in exorcism movies as Russell Crowe has done over the last couple of years, starring in a couple exorcism movies? And will he be good at it, or will he drop the ball? And I'll tell you what, Al Pacino, he's great. I mean, obviously, we all know him. He was in The Godfather. He's Scarface, also Scent of a Woman, Any Given Sunday. I mean, there's just so many movies. I mean, he's in a ton of movies, but so many great movies as well. So him being one of the main stars, him starring as the priest that will perform the exorcism in this movie, I was really knowing and hoping that I was going to be in for something good with him. And then when I saw his co-star was going to be Dan Stevens, the guy who totally impressed me last year, all over my top 10, all over my Academy Awards. This guy was in Cuckoo, which was my favorite movie of 2024. This guy was also in Abigail, who was that movie was in my top 10 from last 2024. He did really well in those movies. And he's just one of these newer names that I didn't really know too much prior to last year that has just been shining, and I've been waiting for him to come back and be in more movies, and glad to see him in this cast right up against Al Pacino. This was a mixed cast, so you throw in Ashley Greene, and I was like, okay, the Twilight girl. But I never got into Twilight that much, even though it was a big thing back in its day. I just recently really liked her in this streaming movie that I reviewed only less than a couple weeks ago called It Feeds, where she stars as this psychiatric medium. And I thought she did fairly well in that, and I enjoyed her performance in that. And then to see her in this cast playing a completely different type of character, for sure. She plays one of the nuns, and she does well in this, portraying fear, and just she goes through a pretty physical ordeal battling with the antagonist in this movie. But then I noticed Patricia Heaton, and I thought, what sitcom lady is going to be in a horror movie? And I kept thinking to myself, well, if rom-com boy Hugh Grant can slam into the horror field and make a great debut in a horror movie as he did last year in The Heretic, I thought, could Patricia Heaton, the girl who we know as Everybody Loves Raymond's wife, Deborah, pull off being Mother Superior in an exorcism movie? And then she followed, and don't forget that she also followed up another 9 years being in a big sitcom throughout the 20-teens, The Middle, as she starred as Frankie Heck in this Midwestern sitcom where she pretty much played a very similar character, but like even more to the extreme, comedy lady. And here she is, and you know, as soon as she entered the scene, she gave me vibes of Isabella Rossellini playing a nun in Conclave. And I was impressed with her. I was like, oh, there's the Death Becomes Her girl, the little eternal beauty of goddess playing this old nun in Conclave. And Patricia Heaton she is doing pretty much the same thing. And I'll tell you what, she does really well. I mean, her character had a very thick accent. I barely even recognized her. And I was like, wow, she really can pull off something by being better than just being that nagging, funny sitcom, Roseanne Barrish type of wife. And then we have Abigail Cohen, who plays the possessed girl. And she does an amazing job with what she had to do. And this was a very physically demanding role. Not only is it physically demanding, but very gross. She's bloody, she's vomiting a lot. You know, typical exorcism movie, they gotta vomit. Her head didn't turn, but she does do a lot of vomiting, spitting up, a lot of heavy breathing, facial things, just crazy talking, flying all over the room, levitating, the whole nine, you know, all that. So props to Abigail Cohen on her role in this. So let's get into the positives and the negatives on this one. And the positives to start off with. All right, let me give you just a little bit of background on me so I can kind of vouch for what I'm about to say. I have been raised a Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school, 40 plus years of going to church on a regular basis, devout. You know, I don't use my YouTube channel as a way to, spread my personal beliefs because I'm very private about what I do and who I am. But I'm going to mention it here because there's so much about the church and the way the church handles these situations here, and knowing that I grew up around characters like this, raised in a family where priests and nuns, and being around these types of people, I kind of know how they tend to operate. And to see that this movie depicted priests and nuns in a very realistic way, and not depicting them as these just perfect people that can just march around being holy and preaching, because they're not that way. They are regular people, and they have suffering, and they have mistakes, and they have struggles just like all of us do. And the characters in this movie, which is mostly priests, nuns, bishops, you know, besides the antagonist, the possessed girl, everyone's a priest or a nun in this movie, and they all have their demons that they are battling with. And it was nice to see realistic characters blended with a realistic way the Catholic Church tends to behave. And this was a gripe that I had in many other exorcism movies that have come out recently. I primarily think of Exorcist Believer, Shadow of God, and The Exorcism. All didn't do their research about how exorcisms go down, how the church operates, and all that. And this movie did its research. Now, I know it was based on, a true story or true characters, two real priests that actually existed in the 1920s and performed an exorcism on an actual girl that lasted for, in the movie it's only like 9 days, but according to the real story, it was like 3 months. And then it was periodically as well, because apparently this dates back to 1912, where the same priest gave her exorcisms, and then they went away from it, and they went after medical treatment, and then she was fine for a while. But in 1928, it comes back to get her, and she's full-fledged possessed and crazy. And the same priest comes back to do the exorcism on her. Now, is this an exact match to how it probably happened? No. Of course, Hollywood puts its foot in there and makes it entertaining enough, with the special effects and the levitation and some of the, the typical tropey things that happen in exorcist movies. Though I will say this isn't, it has its tropes and it has its moments, but it also has its very realistic moments, and sometimes that works in this movie's favor and sometimes it works against it, because realistically exorcisms can be very long and very boring and very ritualistic, and they're not always like the final scene of The Exorcist or The Exorcism of Emily Rose or The Conjuring or any of these movies, and this movie gets into that. Which is another thing where I compare to Conclave, whereas, in Conclave we saw a movie about how priests and cardinals act when they're voting in the new pope. And in this one, you really see how an exorcism being performed within a parish, within a church, at a convent. I guess technically it happened at a convent, but the convent and the church are really close. Probably all the same property. It doesn't really specify, but the way that these characters get torn up and affected by this demon. And I know because the first time I saw The Exorcist, it terrifies me based on my religious background. And it still terrifies me. Now, I've become desensitized because I've seen so many exorcism movies since 1980 whatever I saw it, but this one is up there with the scares, because this girl is very possessed and she knows things, just like how it goes down in these things. She knew things about the priest, and she knew how to get under their skin, and it's obviously not her, it's the demons inside of her. And I'll get into more about what demons are in her when we get into the spoiler section. So the negatives I have, I kind of touched on a little bit. I think this movie was trying to portray more closer to how these things actually go, which made it more of a slow burn and very the pacing issues in the middle front, because it just, they start having these rituals, and it's ritual 1 and then ritual 2, and it's just, repeated prayers, and then she kind of acts a little bit up, and then they calm it down. And a lot of this, in the beginning, it's, they're having the rituals, and there's not much going on in between. Now, as these rituals start to get worse, and the characters start to get disturbed, then things start occurring around the entire property and within the entire parish, and within the entire convent of the church. And then it starts to pick up a little bit more when things start happening in their bedrooms at night, because the demons really start getting into their minds. And these characters are struggling and battling with their own personal demons, their own personal faiths, as they have to face this ritual every day. And the only other thing I'll put into negative was, I guess it's a mixed or negative, but they didn't give too much background on the antagonist, Emma Smith. She basically, it starts off with her, there's a little bit of an intro, a little bit of them talking about, oh, she's coming and there's going to be an exorcism and them planning it, but they literally jump right into these rituals pretty early on, and there's not much mention until a little bit goes on. Then there's this explanation drop, and I guess it's in some of her paperwork, they're going through her file and a lot gets dropped, and what started this, what caused it all, and so forth. And you know, these little explanations, sometimes you don't always need them like that. This movie was fairly short. It was only an hour and a half, so they could have maybe done like a little prologue or something just to kind of introduce our antagonist a little bit better and kind of give the background on her in that way instead of just dropping it into a letter. Okay, I will put this one, it's more a little gripe, pet peeve, whatever you want to call it, in the negative side. But Al Pacino's character, he is this older priest, and in his ritual and a lot of what he does and what he says with this girl and the way he interacts with her, it's done well overall. But, and I guess this is more not Al Pacino's fault, it's more of like the writing or what the script was. He's constantly asking the demon's name, which I know that is something that's part of these rituals. You know, it's important to know the demon's name, but I would say in the front end, in the beginning rituals, this is happening to the point where it's almost annoying, where it's almost all he's asking is, oh, he gets the demon's name. Once he gets the demon's name, it's like the ritual's over. However, it does, as the rituals go on day by day, and I think it's like they were doing the count of it, but they end up losing count somehow, because it was like ritual 1, ritual 2, and like I felt like it was a 9-day event, but towards the end, like the final rituals were never numbered, so they never really say how many rituals they do in this movie on this girl, but I'm gonna go with 9. Before I give my final rating, I do just want to touch on spoilers just a little bit, and there's not too much to spoil on this. I mean, this is based on a 1928 story. I wouldn't say it's well known, but spoiler warning. Okay, so they are claiming that she is possessed by, at one point it's alluded to that it's her father and then her aunt, who apparently, the reason she gets possessed, and we find out through this letter, is like there was witchcraft practiced and she was fed cursed food, and she was part of witchcraft when she was younger, and that's weakened her, and she was also like super like a medium like to it, like she was just very absorbent of this type of stuff, and you know, she gets possessed. And then they basically also claim like the main demon is Judas Iscariot from, you know, the Jesus story, the one who betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And so he's the demon that they're kind of exorcising out of her in the end. And even though this is based on a true story, sometimes it's similar, as I talked about in the most influential video I done recently, where we went over The Conjuring and the Amityville Horror, and I said, you know, some of these movies that pull on based on true events, and you kind of wonder about the real reality of the demonic part in this. You know, there was questions of whether it was all just her having mental problems and physical medical problems versus whether she really was possessed by a demon. And that comes up in this a lot. You know, there's questions on that. And at the end of the day, they do resolve it by performing the exorcism. And in the movie, you know, and I'll put this in the negative as well. This is the final spoiler at the end. Like, when they finally perform that last ritual, that final exorcism, and this was after she kind of escapes into the catacombs, and it gets a little chaotic, and the whole house shakes like an earthquake. I mean, it's pretty extreme. So Hollywood definitely put its finger on this one in the tail end there at the third act. But I was just like disappointed by this one little part where after it's all done and it's apparent that the demons left her, Al Pacino's character is like, is it done? Like, is the demon left you? And the girl's just kind of like, yeah. And like, I'm like, that's it? Like, she says yeah, and like, happy ending, like, the end. And it pretty much, yes. So, I mean, overall, I still thought this was a great movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the documentary style of it. I also enjoyed the acting and every character that was in this. I enjoyed all of them for everything that they brought to it. So we're going to get down to business on this one because I think this is a good movie. It's worth a watch. I'm not saying this is one where you have to run out into the theaters and see it. It might be a good one to stream at some point, whenever, maybe during Halloween season when you're in that spooky mood, or you want to do something a little bit different than the other exorcism movies that you've watched before. But I'm going to give this one a good burger. This one overall is decent. I had a good time with it. I was spooked out. The tension was great. And it's worth a good watch. And Al Pacino and Dan Stevens do a great job. So we'll go watch The Ritual. It's definitely better than most of the exorcism movies we've had recently. Well, if you guys are liking my horror content and you enjoy horror movie reviews and you like discussing Halloween and traditional slashers and such, please give a like, subscribe, tap the notification bell, all that jazz, and come back to see me review more horror movies. And don't forget to stay scared of those satanic demons.
I can't sleep, I can't think.
For us to be divided is for us to fall. We are the ones that stand in the breach and hold back the darkness.
It is he who commands you. Look at the light, Emma! See the cross of the Lord! Reveal yourself!
Emma?
Emma?
Ilayom nos traes.